Berserk is an amazing series that has always been famous. A lot of people know it for its dark themes, amazing storytelling, and extremely detailed art. This amazing story was created by Kentaro Miura. Unfortunately, he died in 2021. However, his legacy will live on, as he created one of the greatest stories of all time and is known for being one of the greatest manga authors ever. As much as I'd love to make a review on the manga itself, I'm going to be doing a 3-part video series discussing the adaptations that came out of Berserk. Some of them are good, some of them are not so much. This video will contain spoilers to the 90s Berserk series. If you haven't read the manga, not only are you a fake fan, but you are safe from spoilers. But anyways, let's begin the review. The first studio to produce a Berserk adaptation was produced by Nippon Television and VAP, and was animated by Oriental Light and Magic. This series was directed by Naohito Takahashi and covers most parts of the Golden Age arc. I'll go over what was removed and what was changed, but man, Naohito Takahashi does an amazing job with this adaptation. This is an adaptation that was just made with absolute passion. The sound design, the animation, the backgrounds, the music, everything is just amazing here. And I'm still impressed by just how perfect it all is. But I still do unfortunately have some problems with this adaptation. Firstly, I don't like the fact that they pretty much just cut out almost all of the Black Swordsman arc. I think that this arc is an amazing introduction to Guts. One of the most important things about our introduction to him is that he appears to be, well, heartless. He genuinely just doesn't really care for people's emotions, and he doesn't really bat an eye in the face of death. But despite that, throughout this arc, there are still subtle moments where we see Guts' true character show through, and we see that he's just like the rest of us. A human who is weak to his own emotions. And no other scene does this realization better and more flat out than the last pages of this arc. During this part, Guts is forced into a position where he has to kill a young girl's father due to him being an apostle. But afterwards, he makes a bunch of derogatory comments to her, which the girl cries and yells, "I'll kill you," to which Guts replies, "Fine, I'm ready, whenever you are." And he walks away from her without even looking at her in the face. As Puck goes over to Guts, prepared to scold him for his heartless attitude, that's when we see Guts crying. This brings up a very important question. Why? Why is he crying? I thought that this was a person who isn't sympathetic towards other people. So what made him this way? Did he suddenly just have a change of heart? What made this happen? And that's just when the Black Swordsman arc ends and the Golden Age arc begins. And I think that this is a perfect way to transition into Guts' backstory and what made him into who he is today. But with this anime, we get a very brief version into the present, and we don't actually get to see much of the present day Berserk before going into the Golden Age arc. Speaking of the Golden Age arc, I don't like how the order of the Golden Age arc plays out differently here. In the anime, starts out with a battle against Bezuso. However, in the manga, the Golden Age arc starts with a scene where we see Guts being born. This whole scene where we see Gambino first meeting Guts as a baby is only really left to a small mention in the anime, which I think is really unfortunate because I think this tells a very interesting start to his full backstory. That being that Guts is a person who has gone through a lot in his life, and he is a person who has had a very hard upbringing, even ever since he was born. And as they mention in this scene, I think that it's a very good hint that Guts is a person who is destined to live a cursed life and always be put down, as we see with how Gambino eventually died and the eventual death of the Band of the Hawk. Another thing that was cut was the part of Guts' backstory where he gets, well, touched inappropriately. If you can't fill in the gaps, then I will not be the one to explain it to you. This is one of the most controversial moments of the entire series, and if you have never read Berserk, this is a moment that you see happen. Not a moment that you're told happens, or it's implied, or anything like that. You are literally shown this awful, awful scene. And it's really sad. But you may ask, well, isn't it for the best that it's gone, and did it even do anything for the plot? Well, yes and no. It probably is for the best that it's gone because I cannot even imagine having to ask anyone to animate or having to voice over this scene. So I don't really blame anyone. I think they actually did a pretty good job with replacing the scene. While it's never directly stated what happened to Guts, they heavily imply what happened through a dream that Guts had. And I think that it's actually a pretty clever way of having to get around actually having to animate that scene. And for those asking if it did anything for the plot, sort of. In the scene where Casca and Guts have their first time having sex, Within this scene, we can see Guts having a traumatic flashback to that time, and not only is it his first time ever telling anyone about what happened to him as a child, but it's also to the one that he loves. And for me, this makes it a very special moment for Casca and Guts, bringing them closer than they already were. That's what I really like about this scene. One thing I somehow almost forgot to mention is that any mention of the Skull Knight is just gone from this anime. Yes, literally every single mention of the Skull Knight is gone. This is actually one of the reasons I don't recommend watching the series if you've never read the manga, is because if you try to continue the manga on the part that you finished watching, you will have no idea who the Skull Knight is. I'm not sure why they got rid of the Skull Knight, but it is a very unfortunate decision. The next thing I wanted to talk about, barely happens in the show, but is still something that I think is worth mentioning. There are some scenes in the show where I think the pacing is just a little bit too fast, and I think the dialogue just needs a little bit more time to settle, just to help it flow more naturally, I guess. One thing I actually really like about this adaptation is that, similar to the JoJo Part 3 OVA, I really like how music isn't too prevalent in some of the scenes that don't actually need it. I really think that this is a neat idea because it helps build the atmosphere and it also helps build tension in some of these scenes. This also helps scenes be creepier when there is just nothing. Merely just the wind blowing or crickets chirping in the night sky. Spoilers to Part 3, by the way. We can see this in the JoJo Part 3 OVA when Dio is talking to Jotaro. And while it may seem silly, Dio just suddenly teleporting I feel like is a really good representation of how scary his ability actually is.
Jotaro. His star platinum and mine, the world, are similar types of stands. How very unexpected.
And with the lack of background music, it really helps build tension. In my opinion, there are just some scenes that I feel like would play out a lot better with just ambience and no music. But anyways, back to Berserk. Whenever music does eventually play, it actually plays at the perfect time, like during speeches or during shock moments or moments of high. It's just perfect music design, like when they first fight Zod and he discovers that Griffith has the Bailet. I really like the absence of music because it helps build the atmosphere and brings in many questions about why he just stopped attacking and asks questions like, what is the Bailet? Is there more than we know? Again, during Guts' goodbye scene, I really like how when Guts and Griffith fight, there is just no music, just the noises of soft footsteps walking in the snow, the wind blowing in the forest, and the dialogue from everyone there. Nothing more. However, the best example of this, I think, is during the scene of Griffith's thoughts while he is captured in his cell. I think this scene is just a perfect example of the themes and the tone you can expect to get from this series. The sounds of the water droplets slowly coming down, the ominous noises in the cell, and just you and your thoughts. Not only that, but seeing one side of Griffith's helmet and his wide eye staring into the dark, only just to see nothing. It really makes you reflect on all that has happened thus far, and it really makes you think about what's happening to Griffith. As mentioned earlier, music does play sometimes throughout the series, and when it does, man does it hit hard. I'm sure most of you have heard Guts' theme before, and even if you don't realize it, this song displays feelings of depression, shock, and maybe even hope. The thing that I love about this song is the interpretation behind it, and the way that it's used. In this anime, the song is played to show a variety of emotions, like in the scene where Griffith asks Guts to join the Band of the Hawk. The feelings here is the feeling of being confused. When Casca checks up on Guts, the feeling here is hope and a little bit of happiness. The point is that this song can be used to display many different emotions. One thing that I really like about this adaptation is how they adapted the tone of a depressing world where death is prevalent everywhere, and some people just don't even react when death is brought upon them. The scene where Count Julius is training Adonis to fight, there is nothing but the sound of sword clashes. This sets up a very ominous feeling. Up to this point, Guts has been told to kill Count Julius, but with him training a kid on how to fight, it really makes us question, will he go through with it? Well, he does, but far worse also happens. Guts kills Adonis. We don't like Count Julius, but now we just watch Guts kill an innocent kid, and not even he knows what to think about it. This scene is meant to shock you, and to help you remember how anyone in this world and anyone in this series can just die. Once again, the silence. The noise you hear is the last breaths of a young boy who doesn't even fully understand what's happening to him, and Guts trying to comfort him in his last moments after realizing he messed up really, really bad. Moments like this are done absolutely amazingly, and as mentioned before, the tone of the scene is absolutely perfect. It really helps bring a whole depressing tone. The silence just fills your head with these horrible thoughts, reminding you of what you just did. As Adonis slowly dies, his last words go with him. The silence of the room becomes louder and louder. It only reminds you of what you just did. The last scene that I wanted to talk about is actually the adaptation of the eclipse in this anime. The eclipse in this version is actually done so unbelievably well that it is actually insane. The coloring in this version of the eclipse is how I always imagined it would look when I read through the manga. However, I want to talk about the voice acting here, specifically for the dub version of Berserk. Now, normally I'm not a dub watcher of anime, with a couple of exceptions, but for Berserk, I think that the dub here is actually a lot better than the sub, especially here. The music playing is the song Murder. As Casca and Judo try and make their escape on horse, Casca demands that they go back and fight. However, Judo says otherwise. As they try to run away, they keep getting attacked, and Judo has to take many hits for Casca just to help her survive. Throughout all these attacks, you can see Judo get more and more injured. Eventually, he isn't even able to stand up on his own anymore. As Casca picks him up and begins to carry him, Judo realizes that he doesn't have much longer to live. He mutters quite possibly one of the saddest lines in the whole show.
If you've got the strength to make excuses, then carry yourself!
There were so many things that I wanted to tell you, but I guess it wasn't in the cards. Just a few special words. You cry a lot when you're alone, don't you, Casca?
Not only that, but he falls backwards and you can hear his last thoughts.
Is that it? Are these really my last words?
Judo has died. Not only that, but knowing his last thoughts, it really makes you wonder what else he could have said. The music gets louder, amplifying the tension and the horror of what just went down. These were just a couple of moments that I think were really done in this adaptation. I could talk about it more with characters like Pippin, Gaston, and more. However, I feel like I would just keep repeating myself. The point is, this adaptation does a really good job displaying the dark atmosphere in the universe of Berserk. The last thing I want to talk about is some of the artwork in this adaptation, and it's actually really good. I love these shots towards the end of the episodes where they're just highly detailed shots of various characters. There are so many shots that just flow together so smoothly and show the emotions of everyone just absolutely perfect. I don't think that the artwork is better than the manga, but to actually expect an adaptation with as good visuals as the manga is a lot to ask for. In conclusion, Berserk 1997 is a very good adaptation of the series. I do not recommend that you should watch this if you haven't read through Berserk, but if you have read through it, I do think that this is a very good watch. But with that, thank you all for watching, and if you aren't already, please subscribe, and stay tuned for more reviews. See you all later.